Chatterfang Squirrel General has largely become my personal favorite deck over the last few years. We've covered the deck several times on the channel, ranging from an early build of the deck where we were still experimenting with the list, to a more recent build that utilizes the Unfinity Attraction cards. We've explored the other legendary squirrels introduced in Bloomburrow, but I have yet to revisit my beloved Chatterfang deck. In this video, I want to take one final look at Chatterfang and provide the ultimate guide to building your own Chatterfang deck. Our deck's goal will largely remain the same. Chatterfang is a 3-mana 3/3 with Forest Walk. Whenever you make a number of tokens, you make that many 1/1 squirrel tokens as well, acting as a sort of unique token doubler. Lastly, Chatterfang has an activated ability that costs 1 black mana as well as any number of sacrificed squirrels. That allows you to give a target creature +X/-X until the end of turn. We are at our core a token deck that has aristocrat potential. Chatterfang giving you a 1/1 squirrel with every token you create can go off with any number of different cards. Having a sack outlet that also doubles as removal makes him even more useful, and it having a black pip also puts us in Golgari colors. Now our list's first strategy will be, of course, making those tokens. I'm pulling out all the stops to make sure that we can make as many tokens as possible as quickly as possible. We are on a few infinite combos, including such classics as the Squirrel's Nest and Earthcraft, which lets you enchant a basic land and generate an infinite number of 1/1 squirrels by using the squirrel tokens to untap the enchanted land. We also have Ivy Lane Denizen and Scurry Oak, which only needs the Scurry Oak to be given a single +1/+1 counter to begin the combo. The Oak then creates a 1/1 squirrel, which triggers the Denizen and lets us put a +1/+1 counter onto the Oak, allowing us to repeat the process until we choose to stop. We also have our trio of Druids, being Deep Forest Hermit, Deranged Hermit, and Draykeeper, who each bring with them a number of squirrel tokens. The former two offer Anthem abilities, though they do have some conditionals that will eventually remove themselves from the battlefield. The latter offers our squirrels Menace, making them much more difficult to block. The nearly obligated combo of Chatterfang with Pitiless Plunderer is a good to include as well, as you will have a number of infinites. Chatterfang only needs to sacrifice 1 squirrel to start this engine. The Plunderer triggers off of the squirrel dying and makes us a treasure token. Chatterfang makes a squirrel since we made a treasure token, and then we can use those 2 tokens to repeat the process. This can be used to wipe clean our opponent's battlefield of creatures, and it can give us a tremendous number of death triggers. We also run a few less explosive means to make tokens, which are just as useful in this deck. Emrakul's Evangel lets us sacrifice any number of other creatures along with the Evangel to create that many 3/2 Eldrazi Horror creature tokens. Should Chatterfang be in play, we also get the same number of squirrel tokens. Hazel of the Root Bloom can give us some token copies of our tokens, and her abilities doubled should we be duplicating a squirrel token. She also allows us to use our tokens as mana dorks. Peregrine Took gives us a single food token whenever we make a number of tokens, which gives us 1 squirrel as well should Chatterfang be in play. We can also trade in some food tokens for card draw, giving us additional card advantage. Scute Swarm is a menacing commander, giving us a 1/1 insect token whenever we have a land enter. Should we control 6 or more lands when this ability resolves, we instead make a token that's a copy of the Scute Swarm. This can turn ugly quick, as that token production will eventually begin to increase exponentially, making for some intense maths on our part. Chitter Spitter is in a lot of ways the quintessential squirrel producer in this deck, allowing us to sacrifice a token at the beginning of our upkeep that further buffs our squirrels. We can also pay 1 green to create a 1/1 squirrel. This will give us fodder for the next turn's sacrifice, and so this scales nicely as you develop a board state with larger squirrels. That will become relevant with our deck's next section, our aristocrat package. Our creatures are going to die, as will our opponents. We can take advantage of these with cards that will gain us value from creatures dying. Carrion Feeder is a pretty basic include here, being a 1-drop that can't block. This is largely irrelevant as we want that free sack outlet. We can then use this to sacrifice our creatures for free, repeatedly, and it gets a +1/+1 counter each time. A great example and a personal favorite of mine would be Marionette Apprentice, a 2-drop, 1/2 with Fabricate 1. Fabricate lets it enter with your choice of a +1/+1 counter or a 1/1 colorless servo creature token friend. Lastly, whenever another creature or artifact you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, each opponent loses 1 life. This can turn into a win condition if we manage to get our engines online. Because it's triggering off of both creatures and artifacts, the Chatterfang combo will work wonders, as we are utilizing artifact treasure tokens as well as creature squirrel tokens. You can also include such abilities as Blood Artist or Zilliput Cutthroat to stock up on redundant abilities. Mirkwood Bats is a 2/3 with flying for 4 mana. It has one crucial ability: whenever you create or sacrifice a token, each opponent loses 1 life. This card I would rank up to be about as useful as the Marionette Apprentice, pinging each opponent each time we either create or sacrifice a token. Again, we are planning on using our tokens extensively, and so getting 2 triggers off of this card for each token is rather useful. My personal pet card, and one I find highly underrated, Shadowheart Dark Justiciar, is a 4-mana 3/4 with 1 relevant ability. You can pay 1 and 1 black and sacrifice another creature to draw X cards, where X is that creature's power. This is a repeatable sack outlet and a draw engine, and can feed into our other combos. Priest of Forgotten Gods lets us tap and sacrifice 2 other creatures to have any number of target opponents lose 2 life and sacrifice a creature. We then add 2 black mana and draw a card. This is a pretty neat mana dork, sack outlet, draw effect, and edict all on one. Ravenous Squirrels is a very useful 1-drop squirrel that gets a +1/+1 counter on it each time we sacrifice an artifact or creature. We can also pay 3 mana, sack an artifact or creature, and then we gain 1 life and draw a card. Species Specialist is a very potent 4-drop that enters, and then you choose a creature type. For us, it'll be squirrels. Whenever a creature of the chosen type dies, you may draw a card. All of those squirrel tokens will either die from combat or be sacrificed, and with this they will give us an additional draw. This uniquely will not draw us out should we have an infinite engine online, as it is a May ability, and so we can choose to not draw in some contexts. Viscera Seer is in here for largely the same reason as the Carrion Feeder. It provides us with a free sack outlet for our creatures. This card gives us the ability to scry 1 for each sacrificed creature. This can be great to flush away cards that we don't want to draw. Warren Soul Trader lets us pay 1 life and sacrifice another creature to create a treasure token. This can be a great way to start our combo engines should we need a sack outlet, and can even help us on our ramp should we be mana screwed. Now, this is a squirrel deck, and we do have a few squirrel cards that will be relevant to this deck. Camellia the Seed Miser is a 3/3 squirrel warlock with menace. She grants our other squirrels menace. Whenever you sacrifice food tokens, you get 1/1/1 squirrel creature token. You can also pay 2 and forage to put a +1/+1 counter onto each other squirrel you control. This not only gives our squirrels some decent evasion, but it helps them bulk up through foraging. Honor Dray Leader is a 1/1 for 3 with trample. When it enters, it gets a +1/+1 counter on it for each other squirrel and food you control. Lastly, whenever another squirrel or food enters, you put a +1/+1 counter onto the Dray Leader. This can become a win condition on its own, as it grows larger the more squirrels and food that we deal in. During those infinite squirrel engines, this can become infinitely large, and with trample as a nasty side effect, it might spell game over for our opponents. The Odd Acorn Gang is here as well, as a 5/5 squirrel warrior with menace, trample, and reach. This card gives all of our squirrels with the activated ability to tap to give a target squirrel +2/+2 and trample until the end of turn. Whenever 1 or more squirrels you control deal combat damage to a player, you draw a card. This can net us 1 card per opponent per combat, so this can be very helpful to refill our hand. I also like the similar to Exalted ability of the squirrels, giving a decent sized boost to a squirrel with trample and ensure that that damage gets through. Thornvault Forager is a 2-mana 2/2 with 3 activated abilities. The first, it can tap to add a green. The second requires it tap in a Forage Resolve to add 2 mana in any combination of colors. Lastly, for 4 mana, you can tap it to put any squirrel card from your library into your hand. This is a squirrel tutor and a mana dork all in one, and a rather flexible one at that. We have a number of squirrels that care about foraging, and so if you have this out, you at least have a way to forage. Lastly, getting access to literally any squirrel in your library is a massive boon, as you can always grab the specific squirrel you need. If you add a card like Maskwood Nexus to the deck, while it's out, since it makes every creature in your library also a squirrel, you can tutor for literally any creature you need. Tusky, Bearer of Secrets, is got a special place in my heart as the OG of legendary squirrels, though it doesn't really care too much for them. It does, however, work as a fantastic source of card draw, and it's incredibly difficult to get rid of. Since we do go rather wide in this deck, this will trigger individually for each creature that connects. Valley Rotcaller is perhaps my favorite card in the deck. This 2-mana 1/3 has menace, and when it attacks, each opponent loses X life, and you gain X life, where X is the number of other squirrels, bats, lizards, and rats you control. Obviously, if we have a lot of squirrels in play, this will burn opponents heavily, and if we have our infinite squirrel engines in play, this is a win condition. Our last section will cover tech that is unique to this build. We are building this Kindred Squirrel deck, and given our strategies, we have access to some spicy cards. Jaheira, Friend of the Forest, lets all of our tokens tap for green mana. This can be super helpful if we're in a bind on mana, as it allows our non-creature tokens, such as food and treasure, to also be tapped for green mana without the need to sacrifice any of them. Culling Ritual can also be used to trade in all of our tokens to make mana, and since this clears off all non-land permanents costing 2 or less, it can wipe out opponents' cards as well, and then we gain a huge swell of mana. Gruesome Fate is such a fun piece of underrated tech. For 3 mana you get a sorcery that makes each opponent lose 1 life for each creature you control. We do run the possibility of going infinite with our creatures, and so this can be a great way to circumvent the need to attack. Most of the time, you'll have to wait a turn to swing, unless we rely on a card like Recorded Crossroads to give haste. But with this, the Gruesome Fate will simply burn opponents just for our creatures existing. Pact of the Serpent is a bit of a brutal card draw spells. We are on cards like Night's Whisper that just draws us 2 cards, or Skull Clamp, an equipment that lets us trade our squirrels in for card draw, but the Pact is our bulk card draw spell. We might lose a decent chunk of life in doing so, and in some situations we might not even be able to play it at all to our advantage, but it is a 3 mana card that can draw us a lot of cards in the right moments. Swarmyard Massacre is perhaps my new favorite board wipe. It costs 5, and then we make 2 1/1 squirrels. Then each creature that isn't an insect or a rat or a spider or a squirrel gets -1/-1 for each creature we control that is one of those types. We make a bunch of squirrels, and then those squirrels take out our opponent's creatures. Since this isn't considering destroying the creatures but giving them a negative debuff, this can get around indestructible creatures. Plumb the Forbidden is another neat card draw spell, but this one is at instant speed. We can sacrifice creatures to copy this spell multiple times, letting us draw 1 more card and lose 1 more life. I personally run Clown Car. I think this is one of my favorite cards from Infinity, and it is technically a 0-drop 1/1. The mana that we get to pay into that X cost gets converted into rolls of a D6. For each odd result we get a 1/1 white Clown Robot Artifact creature token, and each even result puts a +1/+1 counter on the Clown card. If I have a lot of mana left over, I can channel it into getting even more dice rolls. We always have a 50-50 chance each time of making another Clown Robot, and if Chatterfang is in play, those Clown Robots will have squirrels come with them. This is also a loving nod to my list that utilized more of the attraction cards from Infinity and how much I really enjoyed playing it. Collector's Vault has made its way into so many of my decks, being a cheap spell to loot and create a treasure token. There's a lot to do with those abilities, from getting a treasure token and possibly a squirrel if our commander's in play, to setting up the graveyard for a forge trigger later on. Makes this such a good card. Over the last couple of months, I have officially come around on Idol of Oblivion after years of being against it. You get a 2-drop that can tap to net you a card, and given that we are a token deck, that conditional should be met easily every time. Lastly, if we get up to 8 mana, we can trade it in for a 10/10 colorless Eldrazi. Yes please. Sword of the Squeak is perhaps my new staple for this deck, being a 2-mana equipment that can attach for free to a squirrel as it enters. It gives the equipped creature +1/+1 for each creature you control with a base power or toughness of 1. Since almost all of the tokens that we're going to be making are 1/1 creatures, this is perfect to build up a single creature for a huge swing. Beastmaster's Ascension is good if you want to pivot to the aggro and swing in with multiple creatures. If this manages to hit 7 quest counters as you're declaring your attackers, those attacking creatures will immediately gain the +5/+5. Mudflat Village is a newer recursion spell for squirrels, letting us sack the land to return a squirrel from our graveyard to our hand. Okala Village is the other newer card from Bloomburrow that puts a +1/+1 counter onto each squirrel that entered this turn, letting us pump up our army a little bit quicker. All of our 1/1 squirrels then become 2/2s, and given that we can go infinite with this easily, this can be fun. Chatterfang is perhaps the strongest, most versatile squirrel legend available. We have others who are good on their own, but Chatterfang still feels like he's just a cut above them. The amount of combo potential that he brings to the table is, to this day, unmatched. Chatterfang is quick, and because I do build him to have a very low curve, we should be able to set up quicker than most decks. We do fold to some stacks lists should they outpace us or tap down our threats, as our tokens are dinky and fragile. We can recover from board wipes for the most part, but as long as we are able to make tokens again, we can rebuild. My Chatterfang list only runs 34 lands, which is incredibly low for a casual commander deck, and I only do this because of our low curve and because of the potential to make mana dorks and mana ramp out of our other cards. Our access to cards like Jaheira or Hazel, who can turn our cards into mana sources, allow us to free up some slots in the land base for additional spells. As per my usual, I do also prioritize lands that have to enter untapped so as not to impact our tempo. Now, if you're interested in the full deck list that I'm currently working with, I will include a link down below to the Moxfield page. If you're interested, feel free to check it out. But for now, that will wrap up our look at Chatterfang Squirrel General. I hope you enjoyed this video. If so, likes and shares are always appreciated. If you're new here and like what you see, subscribe to never miss a new project. And as always, I'm Flynn. Thanks for watching.